Good morning, everybody, and well, good morning from here in the UK. The evening for you in Australia. I know it's the middle of your winter, but I can tell you that the nice summer we've had here in the UK has come to an end. It's pretty miserable today. It's raining. But anyway, let's get on with our webcast for today. So anybody who sat through my webcast a few weeks ago, thank you for your patience, and hopefully today will be a little bit better. So my topic today is around the PaaS for SaaS concept, specifically extensions for cloud applications, ERP and HCM I'm looking at, and what is it that you can actually do. So first of all, my name's Debra Lilley, and I work for a company called Certus Solutions, and we've just currently been acquired by Accenture. It doesn't happen until October, but I'm very excited about that. I've been working with Oracle since 1996, which is an awfully long time, and most of that's been with eBusiness Suite. I've been very involved in user groups, and when Oracle first started talking about Fusion applications, just after they acquired PeopleSoft and JD Edwards, the user groups wanted to be involved in that. And in order to do so, we had to come together as one group worldwide, and I had the privilege of leading that group, which meant that I had a phenomenal insight into what Oracle were doing all the way through the development process. So that's where I got my information from around Fusion. So I live in Northern Ireland. I live in a tiny little village where this map shows you. If I look at a bigger map of Ireland, that's where it is. So the very northwest of Ireland. And this is what I like to do. Diving is what I like to do, and I've had the privilege of diving in Australia as well, so I'm a very lucky person. So the abstract for this was, this is SaaS, it's cloud. That means that you can't change it or menu. Let's understand what that means and what you can and you can't do. And if we can't do it in SaaS, what can we do outside? How do we integrate this? And yeah, there are a lot of questions, but I hope that by the end of this hour, I'll have explained that to you, and you'll be better off understanding what we can do. So first of all, let's talk about PaaS. So PaaS is Platform as a Service, and it's a generic name for everything above the infrastructure all the way up to the application. There's lots of different definitions, but I've done a few. So Platform as a Service, that's the development suite in the cloud. Software as a Service is the actual applications, Fusion applications. They're not really called Fusion anymore, but people are still referring it to that. So let's use that term. And PaaS for SaaS is to create your own applications to extend Oracle's. I've put a number of links in here. I'll make the presentation available afterwards. There's a 2-minute tech talk. There's something at IT Central Station, and I've got a video. All that are just different explanations or at different time points as the product has developed. So Oracle have lots in their development suite. So the first myth is that PaaS is one product. It's not. It's all of the development suite. And I'm only actually going to look at a few components of that. I'm not going to look at the analytics part of PaaS. I'm not going to look at the database side. I'm really interested. I'm not really even going to look at the integration side. I'm really going to look about the building parts, the building blocks for applications. So, you know, Oracle have their big picture. You can connect your SaaS products to any other applications. We can have coexistence. A very common coexistence is some parts of the SaaS product alongside your existing applications, and they can be eBusiness Suite, PeopleSoft, JD Edwards. They can even be SAP, Workday, any other product. So we can coexist any number of applications together. And what we're talking here is that what we're saying is that what if we wrote our own application? We can coexist them together as well. There is no problem with your coexistence colleague, for want of a better word, being an application that you've written yourself. It could be something that you've written in PaaS, which is what we're going to look at today, but it could equally be something that you wrote yourself in any language. As long as you know that it follows standards, you can connect the two. Okay, so let's have a look more about what we mean by PaaS for SaaS. So Oracle, their definition is build better apps faster, smarter, and more efficiently, allowing you to write, rapidly build and deploy rich applications or extend Oracle Cloud SaaS apps using an enterprise-grade platform based on the industry's #1 database and application server. Typical marketing, but that's exactly what it is. And again, I'm concentrating on that second part, although I'm going to give you an example of an ISV in a minute, but I'm talking about where we want to build something and add it to our system. So the Fusion architecture principles means that our extensions are not customizations. Right? When we were in eBusiness Suite, when we were in PeopleSoft, when we were in JDE, when we were in SAP, we loved to customize. We had access to the database and we made changes in the database and we made changes in the code, and it caused us a nightmare for upgrading. And in fact, today, the #1 reason that people haven't moved to a more modern version of their existing app or to a more modern app is the number of customizations that they're going to have to move. So we've got to get away from that. Now, SaaS makes us do that. Because SaaS, you cannot add to that database. We cannot change the schema. Therefore, we are not going to customize the system. That means we're going to get away from this, how do I upgrade all the time? So what we're going to do is we're going to build something and coexist with our cloud. And that way, we're going to get away from this problem around customization. So I think I've said that. We're going to run more than one app together, and that app can be any app, not just cloud, not just EBS. We're going to develop an additional app to extend that SaaS, okay? And then we can integrate those two together. So for me, the #1 thing that I've got to understand is the user experience. To me, the SaaS, the Fusion applications work because they've got a really good user experience. That's not just the UI, although that's incredibly important, but it's the whole how do you work. And so we have to make sure that anything that we build is invisible to that, or at least not intrusive to that. So we don't want to have a great experience, go off to run our little app and have a crap experience and then come back. Right? We want to have that unified, and we want to have it the same or as close as we possibly can get to that user experience. And I know that in my organization, we're incredibly committed to that because we think that's what makes it great. And if we degrade that by our extensions, then we're doing a whole disservice to the people who've purchased it, but to the applications itself. So currently, we have what's called a simplified UI, is the user experience name at the moment. But in the version that people are currently moving to, there is the ability to have a new user experience or a new UI from release 18B. So people who are upgrading to 13 at the moment will go on to release 18B. A whole other presentation, that was my last presentation, about the numbering and the conventions. But you can download that one, I believe, and you can watch it on demand. So there is a new UX being rolled out. You have to actually switch it on, but there are ways of getting to both of those, so don't worry too much about it. I want, at the end, to have an application where I can say, look, no joins. I don't want my end user to know that they've left SAS and gone into my PaaS application and come back again. And that is pretty much achievable, and we'll talk about how we do that. So to do that, we need to start with the same development tools. Now, the majority of SAS was developed in ADF, so Application Developer Framework, which is part of the Java Cloud Service. But the new UX that's coming in, it starts in HCM Self-Service. The new UX, that is coming in, and that's written using Jet. So those are the tool development tools that we need to be looking at, is either ADF or Jet. And probably the easiest one, definitely for me, because I'm not that technical, is the Visual Builder Cloud Service, or VBCS. This offers some citizen development, but also a lot more technical development, and that's a Jet. That's using Jet, and therefore that one's very good for any new. So let's have a look at some of the examples. The simplest option and the cheapest option using just the database cloud service would be to use Apex. And I love Apex, and I think, the only problem with Apex is it's a no-cost option, and a lot of large enterprises don't see the value in Apex because they feel if they're not paying for it, then it can't be, it's not supported, or it's not robust enough, or it doesn't scale. All of those things are completely untrue. Apex has proven itself over and over again. The only consideration that I've got around Apex is it isn't going to give me the same UI. It can give me a very good UI, but it's not going to give me the same UI. I would use it if the number of people who are going to use that extension is very small, or if I was going to use it for a one-off requirement. So I have used it for collecting data in the implementation stage of my project. So I've made this available to people, we've collected the data, and then I've transferred that data into my implementation. That's fine. Okay, another example we're going to look at in a minute is where perhaps only one or two people in your organization are going to use that extension. And for the cost effectiveness of Apex, then why not use that? But if I want to start rolling it out to a wider community, then I want to be using ADF from Java Cloud Service, or consider using the VBCS, because that's Jet, and that's going to be the UX of the future. Remember, it's being introduced in the current version, the version that people are going to now, and over the next year, more and more will be replaced in it. So probably Jet is the right place to be looking at the moment. The initial version of VBCS was quite aimed at the citizen developer, and technical developers found it a bit frustrating, but now that's been split into two, and the default is the developer version. So none of those problems are there now, and it has great richness that will allow you to mimic automatically the UX that's used in SAS. Another consideration here is mobile. Mobile allows you to mash up applications into one application. It doesn't have to be mobile as in your mobile phone. You still can use it in a browser. Also, it allows you to replicate some functionality offline. So we can update some records offline, and then we can upload them later back into the system. And of course, things like chatbots, which there's lots of talk about chatbots at the moment. So mobile cloud services, there's an awful lot that can be done there. It's not simply, oh, let's have a mobile app. So, having talked about some of the technology, let's go back to the fundamentals. Our SaaS is where our transactional and our analytics happens. Okay, the system that is written and delivered and that you subscribe to with your SaaS subscription. It is sealed. We have no access to the database. We have no access to any of the middleware components. There is a lot of configuration that we can do and personalization that we can do in the application itself, but that all sits in a metadata layer above the code that Oracle delivers. We cannot change anything below that code. You cannot do a database link. You cannot get into the schema. We cannot change any of the delivered code. So, what are our constraints? We can get data out of SaaS. So we can use BI Publisher, which allows us to go against the schema, and we can extract any data that we want. We cannot call an external application from within a process. Currently, there is no way for us to take a call from a process out or from out back into a process. That means that we have to navigate to that PaaS component. So we can add it to our menu, that is no problem. And when we come back, we go back to our menu. We cannot call from a process. I'm going to give you an example here. It's a very silly example, but there's an advert in the UK for cheese on the TV, and you can see people in the cheese factory. They're all doing their job, and then all of a sudden a bell rings to show that somebody has purchased their cheese, and they get up from their desks and they do a little dance, and then they sit down and they carry on their work. If your process for procurement requires you to do that little dance, then I can't help. I cannot add that to the procurement process because it's not considered best practice and it's not considered something that needs to be configured within your application. What I can do is add a button to your navigation screen that says, do a dance. Press that button, send you off to a PaaS system where there's a little dance, and then come back to where I was before. Okay, so that's the system, that's the constraint there. We cannot punch out from an existing process. And now I've laboured that, but that is the number one frustration currently, that we cannot leave an existing process, go off and do something. Right. So we can navigate to it, that's fine. We now have single sign-on, so originally that wasn't possible, but we've now got single sign-on. My PaaS page originally just ran in a separate tab, which meant that my SaaS system might have timed out, but that's no longer true. It runs in an iframe now, so my SaaS system stays valid, so that's really good. Returning PaaS data to SaaS. If an API exists that allows you to put, i.e. return data, then yes, you can. If there is something else, like we have HCM data loader and we have file-based loader routines, there are web services that allow us to automate those. So I could create a file that I then run a web service that says this file's got to be loaded to UCM, and then another web service that says run the FDL loader so that that data is entered into the system. I can do that, okay? But it's that those last ones, the HDL and the FDL, it's quite archaic's the wrong word. It's the right way to load lots of data, but it's not super whizzy fast. And APIs do not exist across all of the systems. We'll come back to APIs in a minute. But there are some basic APIs and they're in controlled release. So there are some there and we can, use them a fair bit. And then when we go back to SaaS, it doesn't automatically take us on to the next stage. What it does is, the only time that would happen is if the loading of data is a trigger for a process. So for instance, if I upload employees into the system and I've got an approvals process for that, the uploading of the data will cause that process to start. It's not the fact that I've returned from PaaS, excuse me, it was the actual uploading of that data. So I said that my first option was Apex, and that whilst it had constraints, I would think it was a good idea if only one or two people were going to use it. And there is a fantastic example of this for a product called FX Loader. So FX Loader is a company, they're an ISV, and they have written a solution around the management of foreign exchange. And so the Oracle SaaS system allows you to upload your exchange rates, but it doesn't determine the management of that. So how often are you going to do it? Where you're going to get that information from? Are there any things that you're going to exclude, etc., etc. Okay, and FX Loader had a solution for eBusiness Suite and PeopleSoft, and when Fusion came along, they thought, okay, it's proper as a cloud solution. So they've written it in Apex, and it allows you to subscribe to rates from Reuters or a bank or HMRC in the UK, and it does that through their web services, and then it allows you to do your maintenance and your cadence within the FX Loader cloud platform, and then it uploads those rates into the Oracle Fusion apps using a standard routine. Okay, and if you want to see exactly how it does that, and it uses those web services I talked about for file-based loaders, then I've left a link here to an Oracle Scene magazine. That's the magazine of the UK user group, where he talks about this in detail. This is a fantastic article, because this is a guy who's written a product and he is sharing how he wrote that product with the development community, because this is a great way of extending SaaS. Now, the user interface is very professional and very good, but it doesn't look exactly the same as SaaS. But as I've said, it doesn't matter, because who looks after exchange rates in your organization? 1, 2, possibly 3 or 4 people. So they've got that and they're not worried about it, but they can call it from their application and it's seamless. It's brilliant. So it's a great example of where Apex is the right answer. So I've got here an example of using ADF. This was an early proof of concept that we did in Certus. We had a look at what could we do around the HCM space. So we thought, like, let's say you're a charity or the prison service or an organization that requires your employees to be vaccinated. Now, I can make the vaccination a requirement, just the same as I can make a degree a requirement. And that's brilliant. It will manage that, no problem at all. But actually, if you're a large organization, it would be easier for you to manage a vaccination program. So you want to know, when does it run out? Do you need to run clinics, or do you send people out to be, with expenses to get their vaccinations? What, how far do you go? And for those organizations where it's key to their business, it may well be useful to add the maintenance of this into your system. So we looked at, we would have employers and managers and HR and health practitioners who looked at this. Someone comes up for a renewal. Can they be renewed? For some medical requirements, you can't have those vaccinations, or they're done through a different process because of other health requirements. Do you need to create a clinic, etc., etc.? Now we looked at this, and using Java Cloud Services only, we could have put rules into JCS and the database, but we would have had no tasks and no notifications. We would have had a great user interface using the simplified UI, and we would be able to use integrations in the Java Cloud, Java code, because there are some REST APIs in the system. And then we would have dashboards based on ADF components. So that was great. Okay, so very basically, we could have done this just in Java Cloud Service. Actually, our preferred option was to use Java Cloud and SOA Cloud, because we wanted to be able to have better rules and tasks. And it would also enable us to go through, a sort of approvals type area. But that was where we looked at. Okay, so that was some of the components that we would have used there. The one I love is the VBCS. This is one that I wrote in March for our user group in Ireland. Those of you that use SAS, here's my screen. It looks very, very similar to the simplified UI. So there's nothing here that would worry an end user, worrying about the fact that they've come out of SAS. They wouldn't know. So here's my my screen. I've got a name. I've got some extra fields here that I've created, but my name is being populated from an API. So when someone goes in here, they're selecting their name from the SAS system. Great master data management. Instead of them putting in their name in whichever format they choose to type it, they're selecting it from the system, so I know we're getting the right data. So great use of the API. All of this additional data is just for this application, but I am connecting the data with my SAS system. Now, I can't give you a demo on this. Unfortunately, today I happen to be staying with someone who's got the worst Wi-Fi in the world. So rather than risk the Wi-Fi not going, I've just done a number of screenshots, which is what I would have delivered for you in the slides anyway. So here I am in my SAS application. If I have the correct permissions, I can go into my navigator and into structure. And in structure, I can create a page entry. So that's a new icon. And I've given it a name. It's a static URL. When I create my PaaS application in VBCS, it gives me a URL for the application. That's all I need to do is share with you the URL. So here's my URL here in the destination. And then now on my home screen in my SAS system, so I'm in my SAS system, here in the bottom right-hand corner, I've got that logo and it says OUG Ireland, and that is completely invisible to my end user that this is not part of SAS. So this gives a big tick to my look no joins requirement. When they click on that, they go straight into that VBTS system. So, and if I've got single sign-on connected behind it, there's nothing for them to do. And here they are in the system, giving them what they want. So let's talk about those APIs. Unfortunately, there are not as many APIs as I would like, but let's talk about APIs in general. This is what we use all the time to get information between different applications. So if I look on, this is a screen print of my phone, I subscribe both to British Airways because I've booked my flight through British Airways, and I subscribe to TripIt because I use TripIt to build up my itinerary for whenever I travel. Now, both those organisations are using the API from British Airways flight information system. Now, you'd expect British Airways to be using that, but so can TripIt. They can subscribe to that API and they can get that information as well. So both of them are giving me the same information. But actually, when I look at the TripIt one, they're also giving me information about the weather, and that's coming from another publicly available API from a weather service. And another way that we use APIs is when I was on the British Airways site and I booked my flight, it gave me the option to add my flight to my calendar. And that's an API from Microsoft, which is allowing me to drop in the details required into my calendar. So we use APIs day in, day out without thinking about it. Oracle Mobile, which is my fourth option, actually, I've been looking at that recently around chatbots, and we'll come to that in a second. But mobile is a great way of mashing information together. And Oracle has something called a digital agency, where they will hold workshops with a SaaS customer or a potential SaaS customer about where they might need to mash up applications. And I've been trained to do this, and we have a product called engage.gov, which is solutions that we've got for UK government, and we've run a number of these workshops for them. And I'll just give you an example. We were talking to the people that run the passport desks at Heathrow, and they are managers. So they HCM managers, they have to approve leave, they have to approve spend, procurement, etc. So they have things to do in the system, they have to run appraisals, etc. But they also stand at a station in the airport checking passports. And the times that they spend there are determined by the frequency of flights, the number of flights coming in, particular flights that they expect trouble from, etc., etc. Now that information comes from the airport, probably the same API that was telling me that my flight was delayed, etc. And then also they get security information from the security services. So there's like three organizations there that are, or three systems that are providing information. Now, one of their problems is that they have to go to an office to do their HCM work. So what if we pushed some of that HCM work to them, their notifications? That can be pushed out through mobile. They can respond to it. It can come back to the system. That would be fantastic. So let's mash that into our mobile app. But also, why don't we tell them your flight's delayed, therefore you've got 10 minutes now that you weren't expecting? Or hang on a moment, there's a security alert for this next flight. I'm going to be more vigilant than I would have been. I'm going to have more people on the shift or whatever. So by bringing that information together, that can help them do their job better. And they go through this, what's their minimum viable product? What applications do they have to get information from? And what would the bill of materials be to build that? And mobile is a great way of doing this. So these workshops are really powerful. And if you got a customer If you're a partner and you've got a customer, or you're a customer and you've got a need for this sort of thing, reach out to Oracle. You better still reach out to me, but reach out to Oracle and say, can we go through a digital mission and see if this is possible? So mobile allows you, that bringing all the information together on your phone. So let's have a quick look at chatbots, because when I was working on chatbots, I found something that I hadn't previously realized. Now, those of you that are developers will laugh when I get to this, but I personally hadn't realized this until I started working on a chatbot. So Oracle Mobile Cloud Enterprise, that contains the chatbot component as well. So there used to be two separate tools, they're now one tool. But if I want to have a chatbot against HCM, I need to have I need to be using Oracle Mobile to do that. So I need a chat client. In my example, I'm using Facebook Messenger. It's really simple. It's free, but it could be a web chat. It could be, I could use a voice on top of that. But anyway, any chat client's fine. Then my intelligent bot, so the determining what it is, my conversations, my intents, is done within mobile. And then mobile talks to HCM Cloud through the API that they've got. Now, my problem here, which I didn't realize previously, was the APIs in HCM have a security risk, which I hadn't appreciated. So first of all, they are very secure in that you have to be given permission to use them from HCM SaaS. However, once you're given the permission, it doesn't inherit the permissions that you have within HCM. So if I'm in Oracle Mobile and I want to use that API and I've been given permission to use it, I can use it for any employee, for any information. Whereas what I might really want to say is, what I only want the end user to be able to see their employees, and I only want them to see a subset of the information. And the API doesn't handle that. Once you've given somebody access to the API, they can see all of the information for all of the rows. So we have to consider how we're going to deal with that. And the way to deal with that is to write a custom API, which you can do within Oracle Mobile. And in that custom API, you say, I want to restrict what you can see and how much of it that you can see. And that's, you put a custom API in there. And part of that custom API will be a login so that you can determine what you're going to allow those people. So we just have to be careful about that. So once we've got a custom API that we're happy to work with, so we give access to the API to the developer, and then the developer writes a custom API that looks after the security and how you're going to handle it, and then it talks to the API that's in HCM or ERP or wherever you're going to. And then your chatbot deals with your, what is it that you're going to ask, your utterances and your intents, and then that custom API. Once the chatbot has determined the syntax that the API needs, so the chatbot takes what you say, your intent or your utterances, and turns that into syntax that the custom API can deal with, which it will then use to talk to the main API and bring that data backwards and forwards. So here's a quick screenshot of the API from HCM Employee. It's just a standard API, but if you call them up, you can see how much is brought back. In fact, I've put in a scan there for you that will take you straight to the API screen, but you will need a login for it to see it. And how do I work out what this is doing? Well, I like analogies, and I think of mobile is allowing me to just a different channel to access the data in my HCM cloud. And I just think of that as like a toll booth. All of us want to get through that road. We want to use the road and we need to pay for it. But some of us will have, you know, an easy pass on our, and we just drive through. Other people will use credit cards. Other people will stop, put money in a box, get change, get a receipt. Okay, but we're all using the road and paying for it, right? And the APIs are allowing us to get access to that data in HCM, and these other products like VBCS, like mobile, like ADF, like Apex are just a different way, a different channel to access that data. Okay, I've talked about the custom API. We do need to limit what we want to see. We do need to add security, and we do need to handle the calls to and from. I've said HCM here. The reason I've said that is because there are very few APIs within finance. There are a few in HCM. I said I wasn't going to talk about the CX modules, but within CX, there is something called an application composer, which allows you to create your own objects in the system, and they then in turn have APIs. But that's not my area of expertise. We're talking about HCM and ERP. So our custom API is going to handle the calls to and from that. So where can you get more information? I've put information here about ADF. There is a rapid development toolkit that was provided by the UX teams that gives you a lot of information there. I wrote an article about VBCS, only when I wrote the article it was called ABCS. Again, that's an Oracle Scene article that talks to you about how you can do that. All the PaaS components are funded through universal credits, which means trying these out is pretty cheap. But of course, remember, you can sign up for a cloud trial, so you can have a go at any of these in advance. So you can sign up for a PaaS trial. So there's a number of places there to go and get information. And really, I want to conclude by going back through those constraints again. So we can get data out of SaaS. There's no limit to what data we can get. And that's using publish. We cannot call our PaaS application from a process. We have to navigate to that process, and I showed you how from release 11, so for a couple of years now, we have been able to do it from within the structure. So it is part of our navigation, no problem. There is single sign-on available with these products, so that's fine. Our PaaS runs in an iframe, and therefore our SaaS system stays current and runs no problem at all. We can return data to the SaaS system only if there is an API that allows it, or by automating another way, either HCM data loader or file-based loader, or whatever other ways of loading data you're using. When we're back in SaaS, it does not automatically take us to the next step in the process unless in the very small use case where the loading of data generates a process for us. So those are our constraints. Do I think we'll always have them? No. I am sure that at some point, as PaaS becomes more and more mainstream, that Oracle will enable us to do that. But today, it isn't. You can, and I didn't put this in here, you can put a process in your PaaS system, especially if you're using VBCS or ADF. You can put processing in there, but it is a separate process. And it's a separate instance of whatever process cloud you're using. It does not use the Process Cloud that is part of the SaaS stack. Remember, we cannot touch anything below the application. So I hope that whistle-stop tour was useful, and I hope that it gave you some ideas, and I'll open it up to any questions. I'll just wait a few seconds because I know that there is a delay, but I don't think there are any questions here. Okay, so I'm told there are no questions. I'm really pleased that the technology held up today. Sorry I didn't do any demos, but it wasn't worth the risk. But what that does mean is that when this is rerun for the other two dates, that it will run smoothly. So thank you all very much whenever you're listening to this. And you can always come to me if you've got any questions later. And thank you very much for listening today. Thank you.